Hey everybody, once again, we are doing micro session number 2 of the Professor and the Pastor. I'm the pastor, my name is Jeff, this is Bob, he's a professor. And so we today are going to talk about something that comes up every year this time of year if you're a Christian, especially if you're like me and you're a Christian and you have little kids. The question of what are we supposed to do as Christians with Halloween? Comes up. It is mid-October now, so that's coming up. You know, it's fall time. It's getting cool out. Kids are excited about candy. That's all my kids think about when it comes to Halloween. Unfortunately, that's what they think about a lot when it comes to Easter, too, which is a whole different thing. But what are we supposed to do with Halloween, Bob?
Oh, boy, Halloween. I'm not going to give the universal answer for this because there is no universal answer. It simply is a time when people kind of gather together, and as the pastor mentioned, they'll go trick-or-treating. Sometimes there'll be parties and things like that. My question is always, is Halloween a real holiday? Is it something we should even consider as a holiday? And, of course, the question is, should Christians participate in it?
Well, it's certainly commercialized because this is
Yes.
where we live is the United States of America, and we're capitalistic, so we turn everything into an opportunity to make money.
Sure. I mean, I walked into Walmart the other day, and the
I
Halloween
walked in
stuff
the
was
beginning of
there.
September,
Yep.
and it was there.
It's all right. And the Christmas stuff's coming out, too.
Yeah.
So, what is Halloween, first of all? You know, is it a pagan holiday? A lot of people associate Halloween with, there is a pagan holiday called Samhain, which is a Celtic holiday. When I say pagan, I'm not being derogatory. I'm just saying these were the ancient people that were not Christians. They pretty much, if you weren't a Christian or a Jew,
It's like
or,
we would
or
say
a Muslim, when you hit the 6th century,
Yeah.
you were a pagan. That's the
we
way
would
the
we
Christian-
would just use the term unbeliever today,
right,
right? Someone who's just not religious.
Right. So Samhain, it does fall around this time. Here's the thing. Most cultures in the ancient world really revolve their whole year around seasons. Seasons and harvest. So you have, in Judaism, which we consider, one of the great 3 Abrahamic religions, they have feasts that involve the first fruits, and they have feasts that involve the later fruits, and so they would have, throughout the year, you have feasts, and some feasts are commemorative of certain things that happened in the culture, like Passover, and sometimes they're combined with the other seasonal things that occur. So most cultures around the world celebrate that because your life depended on crops, depended on hunting, being able to hunt, being able to do things other than just sit around during the winter and celebrate
Survive.
and survive. Yeah. So
And we still do this. I mean, we
Sure.
don't celebrate seasons because most of us are farming, but we put up pumpkins in the fall,
Yeah,
and we
absolutely.
put up evergreen trees in the winter, and then in the spring we get flowers out and all that stuff. So we still live our lives in these cycles of time.
Yeah, we have a festival in my community at the last Saturday of every September.
Right.
And people will buy like scarecrows and pumpkins and basically try to have a good time. So those things are there. So it's easy to find parallels between what Christians do and what the rest of the world does. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. And just to be frank, Samhain falls around the time of Halloween, and it's been adopted by certain people who have modern pagan beliefs. It doesn't mean that the Christians adopted it that way, though. In fact, Halloween doesn't mean anything except the eve, the day before, All Hallows Day. And
Yep.
All Hallows Day was All Saints Day. It goes by several different names. If you were to go with into the Latin American culture, you have the Day of the Dead,
Yep.
which falls at the same time. But it's easy to kind of equate that, the modern Halloween, to the pagan practices. Well,
Yeah, so I think a lot of people associate Halloween with like satanic worship.
and that's because of the way we've commercialized
Yeah.
it. I mean, around Halloween, you'll get all the horror movies coming
Yep.
out. You'll have people who will dress up as, witches
With
and
blood
demons
and
blood.
all kinds of stuff, yeah.
When I was in college, I did work with Youth for Christ. No, Campus Life, I'm sorry. Well, Youth for Christ Campus Life. And of course, that is a group that kind of targets high school kids and early college
Young
kids
adult.
and things like that. Young adults, basically. And I was living in New York at the time, going to Nyack College, and the group that I was associated with was in New Jersey. And we did a thing called, basically was a haunted house.
Yep.
They would take a house that was essentially condemned and turn it into a haunted house. I dressed up as a zombie for
Wow.
one of those things. There were people, but you were basically trying to scare people to death
Yeah.
as they went through it. And looking back on that, that's probably not the best way for a Christian to celebrate Halloween. But of course, at the end, we had a gospel message.
Yeah.
So they had to sit through a video.
When I was a kid in youth group, we had these. We called them judgment houses because we Christianized it.
Yeah.
And we took people, and I was in Florida, so the room that was supposed to represent hell, we would just leave the door open, and it was all hot and humid in there and uncomfortable. And then the room of heaven was just like the best air-conditioned room in the building, and we made it real appealing that way. So, and that's always fallen around the fall festival,
Sure.
Halloween, fall time of year.
So I want to go back to that fall festival. There's and Samhain, just to kind of close the door on that. Samhain basically was the way the Celtic calendar worked. Was the year was divided into two parts. One was a part where basically you're done with the harvest, you're closing the door on growing things, and you have winter coming in. So that's about a 5-month period for them. People up in the British Islands and things.
You have to prepare.
And then the other side of that, of course, was the growing season, the time when you could go hunting and things like that. So for them, this was more or less the final celebration. But ancient people didn't use the calendar we use. They used what's called a lunar calendar, and the Celts had kind of this hybrid lunar solar thing, where you're following the cycles of the moon. And that means that their celebration probably didn't fall on the same day anyways. And actually in Judaism it was that way up until...
So it's a little bit the way that we celebrate Easter Sunday.
Yes.
It's not exactly every...
Right, and that's based on a lunar cycle too. So when we celebrate Easter following Passover, and of course Easter is a little bit different. They have a different formula, but it basically is, and Passover follows the new moon. So you actually have these cycles that are lunar, so you have floating holidays. I don't see that Samhain would be any different. For Christians, though, we find there is another holiday that was initiated called All Saints' Day. Now, All Saints' Day is different between the East and Western churches. For us in the West, it's November 1st.
Right, no matter what.
Yeah, Gregorian calendar.
And this is All Hallows Day.
Yes, this is All Hallows Day, and the day before that is All Hallows Eve.
where we get the word Halloween.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're not really adopting a pagan holiday. In fact, there's some discussion that suggests that All Hallows precedes this other holiday. It's just that there's kind of this correlation in time. But you could probably find that in any culture. If you were to say, go to the East, there's probably, and I can't say this for sure, but there's probably celebrations when they bring in the final harvest,
Yeah.
and the snows are coming, and things like that. So for Christians, this is All Hallows Eve is a ancient Christian holiday dating back around the 4th century. The Eastern Church celebrates it really around Passover or around Pentecost would be the
Right.
other way, which coincides with a festival of the
It does.
ingathering of food. So should Christians celebrate Halloween? I think it's going to depend on how you celebrate it. It's not going to depend on, if you're running around dressing up and trying to scare people and doing things like that, you certainly should not be scaring kids. Halloween should be something that should be approached carefully. Of course, you're collecting candy from strangers, even or your neighbors, and as parents, we always sorted through that candy.
Yeah, there's that
looking
real
for things.
practical care aspect
Sure.
of, yeah.
We never dressed up as witches and zombies. I have a story to tell about that. Oh, wow, I can't say that. I dressed up as a zombie for Youth for Christ, but I didn't pick that costume. But we don't try to denote evil beings. If you're dressing up like a Star Wars character, who cares? I mean,
Right.
It's just, you're basically just trying to have fun and pretending. You don't want to even pretend to be evil, though. So that's one of the things I would caution. So let me tell you my story. It's not really my story. It's my daughter-in-law's story. Lindsay is my daughter-in-law. She's a very sweet girl, very good Christian. She really doesn't want to do anything that might offend people, and she doesn't want to participate by dressing up like witches and goblins and things like that.
Sure.
She was invited by somebody in her church to a party where it was a witch's party. And everybody was supposed to come as a witch. So she kind of wrestled with this because she did want to fellowship with the
Sure.
people. So she went as a sand witch. And she made herself a costume.
So clever.
And everybody at the party, people would come up to her at the party and say, I don't quite understand your costume. She says, I'm a sand witch.
That's awesome.
And it was one of the most clever and hilarious things I had ever encountered.
See, that's wise as serpents, gentle as doves kind of stuff. That's
so
really good.
So but that's something that probably you could think about if you're going to a party and there may be something a little bit off center. Think of creative ways that you can be a witness to people.
Yeah, I
things
think
like that.
as I think about this question as a parent of young kids, and then also as a pastor, I think there's two main errors. Of course, we tend to talk about this with any kind of sort of spiritual warfare conversation, which this touches on, where there's sometimes people who are the extreme where they don't consider that they can, be welcoming any kind of evil into their life they just think I can participate in whatever, it doesn't matter. The symbols don't matter, nothing matters, I can do whatever I want. And then there's another group of people who maybe are on the extreme of being afraid of anything. I don't want to even look at, a broom because it's symbolism of a witch and it's going to bring an evil spirit in my house. And I think both of those are probably error. I was telling you before we started recording, the Bible seems to speak over and over about not being a slave to fear, not being not playing around with fear, and that for me is probably the thing that I try to kind of pay attention to in my own soul when it comes to Halloween. Is like, am I goofing around with something that actually has the appearance of evil, or is sort of welcoming of evil into my home?
It's very much like eating meat offered to idols.
Yeah, exactly.
With eating meat, Paul speaks of our dietary habits as witnesses to certain people. In Corinthians, I think he's speaking to Gentiles whose families would look at their participation in the feast, in food offered to idols, as their participation in paganism. And that's not a good witness. You don't want to do that.
Right.
In Romans, he speaks about it as in a more positive way, where he is saying, you should restrict your diet for those who are weak in the faith.
Right.
So both of those are things that we need to understand, that what we do is always a witness to the world, and something that we need to actually say, hey, this is, I don't want to offend anybody, but I need to be a witness to what I believe in Christ. So that's something that we should all do.
But we're also not saying that going trick-or-treating with your neighbors means you're sinning.
Right.
Because you're participating in any form whatsoever. No, it's a little more complicated than that, and you have to use discernment.
Absolutely. So All Saints Day is a day that you can celebrate. Maybe you should research that a little bit. It would be great to have a feast on All Saints Day. There is, we should talk about maybe what the church does. Our church, we have trunk or treat.
We participate with the neighborhood association that does a trunk or treat. It's really a safe thing for the kids.
Yep.
And there's some rules around scary stuff, and we view that as a way to be in the world but not of the world, be a witness to our community, be present in our community, and not make them feel like we're looking down our nose at them in judgment. So
yeah, we certainly want to be a positive influence, not a negative one, and not make them perceive that there's something that we are looking down our noses at them. The other thing we used to do growing up is our church held an alternative party, so we always had like a holiday party. We never called it the Halloween party.
Right.
Because there was that thought that this is participating in evil things. There is also another holiday that falls around this time, which is Reformation Day.
Yes.
Reformation Day for us Protestants
It's a big deal.
It could be a big deal.
Yeah.
We don't really celebrate it that much, but it's the day. There's two ideas here. One is that it's the day that Martin Luther, when he wrote his 95 Theses, hammered it on the door of Wittenberg Cathedral, which was really kind of a bulletin board, a public bulletin board to say, hey, these are things we need to discuss. And that kind of triggered a whole host of events that led to the Reformation. So it's called Reformation Day. Some people believe, some modern scholars believe it's the day that he actually sent his defense to the basically to the Catholic Church saying, this is why I believe this. So either way, it is the day that kind of triggers events that cascade into what becomes the Reformation.
Which is where Protestant churches come from.
And that would include us.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's an important holiday for Lutherans, for your Reformed churches like the Presbyterians and some others, and for other Protestant churches. We do see this as, hey, this was a triggering event.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So some people will celebrate that. We don't really celebrate it that much, but it certainly is something to keep in mind that this kind of falls on the same time frame as All Saints' Day, which is when we remember those who went before us and who were witnesses and who were the holy. That's what All Saints means, the holy people. So they were the people who have passed on, and we just kind of remember them. We don't worship them. We don't, as Protestants, we don't pray to them. Some people, prayer in the Orthodox Roman Catholic Church is a little bit different. They're asking their saints to pray for them, and they do believe that the saints are actively participating in the church, which is fine. How that occurs, it's not something I can answer.
So basically, we've made another video where we don't actually answer the question, but we kind of do. And here's what I would say. 3 things to keep in mind when it comes to, if you ask the question, okay, that's cool, you guys just spent the last 15, 20 minutes talking about that, but I've got kids and I want to take them trick-or-treating. Should I or not? Here's how I would answer that. Number 1, don't be afraid. Don't live in fear. Number 2, live in freedom. And number 3, be wise. Those 3 things together, sort of, if you put those together and you pull out the result, you get basically biblical discernment. Don't be fearful. Be free, but also be wise. And I think that's generally true in your whole life. And when it comes to Halloween, listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit in you if you're a Christian. And if it's telling you, hey, this is really making me uncomfortable, then be free to not do it. Or be free to participate if you feel like it's a good and fine thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is be willing to turn whatever situation you're in, which could include Halloween, into a witness. Dress as a sandwich.
That's great advice. Dress as a sandwich. Well, thank you for watching with us. If you have questions, you can leave them down in the comments of wherever you're watching this, or you can send an email to the email address that's in the description. And you can participate with us in our next video, which will be coming soon this fall, and into next year we're going to be doing some more videos as well. So thanks for watching once again.